When my sister Rachel called me that Tuesday morning, she sounded unusually cheerful. At first I thought she was just in a good mood. Rachel had always been the kind of person whose energy filled the room or the phone line in this case. But the way she spoke felt different, almost rehearsed. "Hey," she said brightly. "I just wanted to tell you something before you hear it from someone else." Whenever someone starts a sentence like that, you already know the next few words aren't going to be good. "What happened?" I asked. There was a pause, just long enough to make my stomach tighten. "Well," she said finally, "Mom signed the house over to me yesterday." For a moment I thought I'd misunderstood. "Signed what over?" "The house," she repeated. "You know, the house we grew up in." I remember standing in the middle of my kitchen, staring at the coffee maker like it might explain what was happening. Our house. The brick one with the wide front porch and the big oak tree in the yard. The house where my parents had lived for nearly 40 years. The house that still smelled faintly like Dad's pipe tobacco, even though he'd been gone for almost a decade. "You're joking," I said. Rachel laughed softly. "No," she said. "It's done. My name is Daniel Carter, and until that morning I believed I understood how my family worked." Rachel had always been the confident one, the charming one, the one who could talk her way into or out of almost anything. Growing up, teachers loved her. Neighbors loved her. Even my friends liked her more than they liked me. She had a way of making people feel like they were the most important person in the room. And Rachel knew exactly how to use that ability. I was different, quieter, more cautious. While Rachel talked, I listened. While Rachel dreamed, I planned. And while Rachel moved through life with the easy confidence of someone who expected things to work out, I spent most of my time making sure they actually did. For years, that difference between us didn't seem to matter. Until it did. After Dad died, things changed in our family. He had been the steady center of everything. The one who handled repairs, finances, and every decision that required confidence. When he was gone, Mom struggled more than she let on. At first, Rachel promised she'd visit more often. But Rachel lived 2 hours away in the city, and her life was always busy. New jobs, new relationships, new plans. I lived only 40 minutes from Mom's house, so I naturally became the one who checked in. I fixed the leaking sink in the kitchen, replaced the broken fence panel in the backyard, helped Mom understand the bills Dad used to manage. None of it felt like a burden. It felt like what a son was supposed to do. Rachel visited maybe once every few months. But when she did, she always brought excitement with her. Stories about new restaurants, trips she wanted to take, ideas about how Mom should modernize the house. Mom loved those visits. Rachel made her laugh in a way I hadn't seen since Dad died. Looking back, I think that's where everything began. Rachel started asking questions. At first, they seemed harmless. "Have you updated your will since Dad passed away? Who helps you manage your finances? Have you thought about estate planning?" Mom would mention these conversations casually when I visited. "She's just trying to help," Mom said once, and I believed her. But over time, the questions became more specific. Rachel began talking about how complicated things could become if property wasn't organized properly. She talked about taxes, legal paperwork, inheritance laws. Most of it sounded confusing enough that Mom didn't want to deal with it, which apparently was exactly the point. According to Rachel, the idea of transferring the house into her name had been a simple solution. She explained everything to Mom. Or at least she explained it in a way that sounded simple. "All it does is avoid problems later," Rachel told her. "No one loses anything." Mom trusted her. Why wouldn't she? Rachel had always been the one who spoke with confidence. The one who sounded like she understood things. So when Rachel arrived one afternoon with a lawyer and a stack of documents, Mom signed them. Just like that. 40 years of memories changed ownership in less than 30 minutes. When Rachel finished explaining this over the phone, I felt something inside me go cold. "You didn't think to tell me before doing this?" I asked. Rachel sighed. "Oh, Daniel," she said, "you're always so dramatic. Mom wanted this. Besides," she added, "it doesn't really change anything. But I knew that wasn't true. Because when someone secretly transfers ownership of a house, it changes everything. I drove to Mom's place that afternoon. The house looked exactly the same as always. The same worn porch steps. The same flower beds Mom had been tending for years. But knowing what Rachel had done made the place feel strangely different. Mom answered the door slowly. She looked nervous, which told me everything I needed to know. We sat at the kitchen table. The same table where my parents had eaten dinner every night for decades. "Rachel said she told you," Mom said quietly. "She did." Mom folded her hands together. "I thought it was just paperwork," she said. "She said it would make things easier later." There was a long silence. Finally, I asked the question that had been sitting in my chest since the phone call. "Did you want to give her the house?" Mom hesitated. "No," she said finally. "I just didn't want to argue." That answer hurt more than anything else. Rachel hadn't convinced Mom. She had simply overwhelmed her. Over the next week, I started digging into the details. Rachel had filed the property transfer legally. The house was now registered in her name, at least on paper. Rachel clearly believed everything had been handled perfectly. She even called me again 2 days later, sounding almost triumphant. "You should relax," she said. "Nothing bad happened. Mom still lives there. And when the time comes, we'll figure things out." But Rachel had forgotten something. One small detail. A detail buried in the paperwork from the day my parents originally bought the house. Back then, Dad had done something unusual. Instead of buying the house entirely through a traditional mortgage, he placed part of the property ownership into a family trust. The trust had been designed to protect Mom in case anything happened to him. But it also contained a clause Rachel clearly hadn't noticed. Because when Dad created that trust, he had listed 2 co-trustees, Mom and me, which meant that legally, Rachel couldn't transfer the house at all. Not without my signature. When my lawyer confirmed this, I felt a strange mix of relief and anger. Rachel had spent weeks carefully arranging everything. Meeting with lawyers, preparing documents, convincing Mom, and yet she had overlooked the one detail that made the entire plan invalid. Rachel found out 3 days later when she received a letter from my lawyer. I'll never forget the phone call that followed. For the first time in her life, Rachel didn't sound confident. "What did you do?" she asked. "I fixed it," I said. "You're ruining everything," she snapped.
No, Irraplia.
"You did that." The legal battle didn't last long. Once Rachel's lawyer reviewed the trust documents, the outcome was obvious. The property transfer had never been valid. Within a month, the house was back in Mom's name, exactly where it should have been all along. Rachel didn't speak to me for nearly a year after that. Part of me expected that. Rachel had always believed she could control the story. This was the first time someone had rewritten it. These days things are quieter. Mom still lives in the same house. The oak tree in the yard is bigger now. The porch steps still creak the way they always have. And every time I visit, Mom tells me she's glad the house stayed exactly where it belonged. Not with Rachel, not with me, but with the person who built a life inside it. Because sometimes the biggest family conflicts aren't about money, or houses, or inheritance. Sometimes they're about something much simpler. The difference between someone who speaks the loudest and someone who notices the detail everyone else missed.